depth of field, what exactly it means. So my person is here, okay, focus point where that subject is there. So I told you that time, like foreground, subject and the background, three things are there, right? So for me, if this person is a focus, is this person is on focus, background, what exactly it is, the tree and the mountain. So if I'm using this particular focus point where my subject is there and this particular area only is in focus and all the area rest is in blur, then we will call it as a smaller depth of field. I'm estimating, sorry, smaller depth of field, narrow depth of field, or a shallow depth of field we called it. Correct. When we have the same thing, my subject is here and rest all the things are also coming clearly in my image, then we will call it as large depth of field. Perfect.
Here, Raji, one thing. Will it change the distance between the subject and camera, right? Will that have any impact on depth of field?
Yes, this is the third factor. So basically, I will right now we will go in a sequence. So it will create a clear picture for you. First of all, you understood like what exactly is the depth of field, correct? The area which is sharp in your image, and that we call it as a depth of field, sharp zone, right? So now here is the sharp zone, which is a small. Here the sharp zone is too big, correct? So now same thing. You can see over here. How does the depth of field affect you? So you can easily see these flowers are too bright, too sharp click, and the rest things are blur. So well, it helps to know where the given depth of field starts and where it ends, because you like to subject the position within the area. Fortunately, depth of field always starts somewhere in front of the subject which you focus. Whenever you are focusing that particular from that particular point, the depth of field will get changed. Correct. And it ends where somewhere behind it. This is why one can get away with not looking exact boundaries when taking a picture. So now you can see here. Yeah, we will understand first of all the settings. So he is using Nikon D600, which is the crop sensor camera, plus Tamron 150 600 mm lens, 150 to 600 mm lens, which is a bigger focal length. Then G2 series lens is here, and he shot at 600 mm. Okay, 600 mm is a tele lens, right? 600 mm is a telefocal length. You can see what is the aperture value he is using.
6.3.
6.3. Ideally, on a 6.3 particular aperture value, you will get a much more area in the image. Correct? Ideally saying. But why we are not getting over here? We are getting only small area.
I think one thing which is very high focal length, 600.
Correct.
All the distance between the camera and the subject also one other.
Correct. So now you can see CFF 6.3 is there. 1/640 is shutter speed. 800 is the ISO. 2 meter distance from the flower. 2 meter is the distance. Focusing distance is a 2 meter. Correct. Then now, which factors actually affect a depth of field? There are total 3 factors which affects a depth of field. Okay. What is the first one? First one is the distance. First one is the distance. Now here we will understand. See, that person. Okay, these particular subjects are there, and these subjects are aligned properly on a table. So the closer you get to the subject, the shallower your depth of field will be. Means if you are shooting a subject which is 1 feet away from you, so when the subject is 1 feet away from you, you will get a much more blur background. But if you are increasing the distance between the subject and the camera, if you are shooting with 2 feet away or 3 feet away, so at 3 feet you will not get that much blur kind of area. So see here at 1 step away, okay, this example was taken as 35 mm. 35 mm is a constant focal length they are using. 2.8 is the aperture value. 2.8 is a very open aperture, big opening. So ideally you should get a blur background at 2.8, correct? So 2.8 focus was on the front doll, and the focus is on front doll here, right? See how the eyes of dolls at the back are blurred here. You can see these eyes
Yes.
are blurred. So he's using 2.8, which will give you a blur background, but his distance from the camera and the subject is less, one step. Okay, we can assume it like a 1 feet. Same setting is there, same setting. If only he increase the distance between the camera and the subject. Okay, see, this indicates a quite now at 3 steps away, everything is in focus and up to the needs are at the back. So in second image, what happened? He moved his camera back 2 feet away. So in 2 feet away, same setting is there, but then this maximum blur became now a less blur. And if he's again increasing the distance with the 3 step, then background and foreground has become we can say same. So the first factor, what it says, your first factor is distance, what we call it as a focusing distance. So focusing distance, what exactly it means? If your subject is close to your camera, the focusing distance is small, like a 1 meter, like a 1 feet, then your blur background or a depth of will be also will be a small. Okay, if your focusing distance get increases, then your depth of field also increases. So basically focusing distance is proportionately related to the your focal sorry depth of field. Focusing distance is focusing distance is related to the depth of field proportionately. So if a focusing distance get increases, same time your depth of field also will increase. Focusing distance get decreases, depth of field also will decrease. Right? You understood, Hariji? Right? Is there any concept? Is there any misconception or like a problem you have? First factor completed. So if you are shooting 1 feet away from your camera, subject is 1 feet away, you will get much blur background. But the same subject, if you are shooting at a 10 feet, then you will not get that much blur background. Right?
Will be depth of field will be larger.
Larger. Perfect. Correct. So when we shoot as a landscape, so that time the subject is too far your camera, right? Mountains, everything is too far away from your camera, and that's the reason you are shooting with the 8 value or like a 11 aperture. You will get everything clear in your image. But the same time, if you are shooting a person who is at least 2 feet or 2.5 feet away from your particular camera, then you will get a blur background, maximum blur. So first factor is clear, right? Then we will right now use the second factor. Second factor, what exactly it says? The second factor is an aperture. The wider your aperture, the shallower is your depth of field will be. Wider aperture. So here we will see with the numbers. So if my number is smaller, like a 1.8 or like a 2.8, so what will be the aperture? Opening big. Smaller the number, opening is bigger. Bigger the number, opening is smaller. Perfect. This much you understand clearly. Correct. So now, same thing what they did over here. These are the dolls on the same distance. Everything is same. At 2.8, you can easily understand 2.8 what happened. The focus is on the front doll. Okay. Focus is on the front doll. Background is became blurred over here because of the 2.8. So 2.8, when we are using an aperture, we will get a blur background. Okay, that is the first thing which we clearly understood earlier one. Second, what he did, he shifted his aperture to 5.6. From 2.8, he shifted to 5.6. So now when he shifted to 5.6, so ideally what should happen? Your depth of field now will be increasing. The zone of sharpness will increase. And because of this particular reason, you can see now these two dolls which were there in the background, these two dolls are started coming into the picture. They are not 100% clear, but now they are started coming clear in your image. Correct? In the second. And the same thing, if you increase your aperture to f14 and your every rest all the things are same, then you will see front, that is a foreground, and background is clear for you. So now everything is clear, correct?
Yeah.
So aperture again, aperture is related to the your depth of field. When aperture opening is bigger, that time you will get a much more blur background. When opening is smaller, that time you will get a small maximum sharpness. So at f2.8 you will get the blur background. Simultaneously f8 you will get a properly clear value. F14 again you will get a much more wider area is in focus. So f14 you can see everything is in focus, right? Now the third factor. First, what we understood, focusing distance. Focusing distance, what it says, focusing distance, if your focusing distance is a small, you will get much more blur background. If your focusing distance is bigger, then you will get a less blur background, correct? Right, this much you understood, first thing. Second
Yeah.
thing is your aperture. What exactly an aperture tells us? Aperture tells us, like, if my aperture is a smaller opening, smaller opening smaller opening means number is high, 8, 11 or 14 and all, that time you will get a maximum sharpness in your image. Perfect. Everything will be sharp, like f8 if you are shooting, everything will be properly sharp. If you are shooting f 2.8, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, your the lower the number which you take in your camera as a aperture, maximum blur background you will get. 1.2 will give you a much more blur background, right? Because 1.2 will give you a very small area of sharpness in your image, correct? So this is the second one, that is the focal distance and aperture value we discussed. Now this is the third thing, focal distance. Focal distance, which means a focal length of your lens. Perfect. So this is again related to your related to your depth of field. Good. So what is this?
The focal length only, right? The
Yeah, focal
same.
length. Same. Earlier it was a focusing distance. Focusing distance. Now it's focal length. Focal length of your lens. What exactly it says? So it says when you have a smaller depth, smaller focal length, 80 mm, 24 mm. So that time you will get a much more sharp image in your image. So you can see at 24 mm, I'm getting all I think 6 dots in my image. All 6 dots are clearly visible. These 2 dots are not that much visible like this. There are a little bit blur, but we can clearly identify and we can clearly see the eyes of these last 2 dots at 24 mm. When I'm increasing my particular length to 50 mm, here you can see 50 mm. So now 50 mm, once I shifted to the 50 mm, so what is happening? Same, everything is same, only the blur background is becoming much more blur. The background is becoming much more blur. So once you increase the focal length, your background is also becoming an blur for you. Same thing if I shoot with the 60 mm, 70 mm. So what it I will do when I'm using a 70 mm, so I will be zooming that lens, right? I will be zooming from 24 to 70 mm. So once I zoom that particular lens to 70 mm, and my focus is on this particular 2 balls which are in the front, then my rest all the things are blur, correct? So your third thing, that is a focal distance, that is a focal length, related is continuously related to your depth of field. So here three factors which comes with the picture. Once we understood that is a focusing distance, second is a pure focal length, and third thing is your aperture. You understood clearly, Hariji, or is there any confusion in that particular concept? Is clear,
Very
right?
clear.
So what you will do now, how you will apply? You understand the concept. So how you will apply in your image? Simply, you will understand your distance with the subject. First thing, your distance with the subject. Second thing, subject and the background distance. Third thing, and third thing, your limitation of your lens. Because if you want to click, but again, if you don't have that aperture value in your lens, then you are binding up with the physical limitation. Correct? Then you will get a problem. So now you can see over here, this person now shooting with the D600. D600, sorry, it's a full frame camera, I think. I have to check, I don't know. Tamron 150 to 600 mm lens is using
Is it 100?
600 mm, which is a telephoto lens. 450 mm lens he is using. Okay, 450 mm lens, which is a very big focal length. Correct? Now he is shooting with the ISO 100, which is the daylight. So that's the reason he kept up with ISO 100. 1/800 is the shutter speed because the action is going on and there is a too much light which is available in this scenario. And you can see f6 is a aperture value. Now, if he use 18 mm with the f6, then he will get everything in a sharp. Correct? 18 mm with the f6. But if he is using the 450 mm, because of the 450 mm, since he is using the f6, then too the background is becoming much more blur. Because what happens over here, focal length is too much. Okay, that is a 450 mm. Second thing, the distance is too far, because distance you can see about 330 meters, 100 feet away from the leopard. So he's shooting 100 feet, which is too far. So focusing distance is too far. Then, and third thing, he's getting the background, because this lion, leopard, and the background is too far. Correct. So because of this, in the wildlife, you get a much more blur background because your focal length. Correct. Sorry, your focal length is too much here.